Bem-vindos a mais um episódio aqui no Don't Panic, It's Organic. Dessa vez para o tutorial de SEO com experts, para a gente falar de SEO para Google Notícias com uma das referências mundiais no assunto. Para quem não conhece, Barry Adams, ele é uma das referências em SEO para Google Notícias, SEO, News SEO, e é o que a gente vai falar aqui hoje. Eu vou deixar ele se apresentar, porque eu acho que fica mais fácil vocês conhecerem quem é esse profissional. Caso vocês ainda não conheçam, teremos todos os detalhes dos seus perfis sociais aqui na descrição do vídeo. Barry, thank you very much for accepting this invitation. Rest assured, I only said nice things about you as I was introducing it. So please, for those here in Brazil that don't know Barry Adams, give us a roundup of your expertise.
Yeah, thanks, Felipe, for having me. I'm Barry Adams, and despite my very English-sounding name, I'm actually from the Netherlands originally, born and raised as a Dutchman, although I've been living in Northern Ireland now for the last 15 years. I've been doing SEO, well, since before I realized it was called SEO. Back in 1998, I built my own website and realized nobody was visiting it. So I thought, what do I need to do to get traffic to that website? And that's how I really got started with SEO, trying to get my website listed in the Yahoo directory and on DMalls and things like that. And then, of course, Google came along and changed everything and became the dominant search engine. SEO became a professional thing for me in 2005 when I got a job as an international webmaster, which is still the coolest job title I've ever had. And part of my remit was to generate traffic for the company that I worked for their website, and SEO was part of that. And in 2007, they sent me to New York to a search engine strategies conference, and that conference is when I really caught the SEO bug, and really started to focus on SEO and really thought, well, this is something I want to specialize in. I've been bouncing in jobs, between different jobs, in-house jobs for many years. And when I moved to Northern Ireland, one of my jobs here was in-house SEO at the Belfast Telegraph, which was my first exposure to SEO for news websites and how that was different from regular SEO. But that job only lasted a year, and then I went agency side for 4 years and worked at a local agency. And then I decided to go freelance in 2014. And at that time, I took on any sort of SEO client, e-commerce, brochure website, you name it. But in 2016, I started working with a news publisher in the UK when they relaunched their website. And that's, I really, again, started to focus on news SEO and realized that it's probably a bit underserviced as a niche, at least here in the Western Hemisphere. There's not a lot of freelance or agency consultants who focus on SEO for news publishers. So I decided to see if I can develop the specialty further and really build a profile as a specialist in news SEO. And in 2019, I started my own newsletter as well, SEO for GoogleNews.com, to sort of help that personal brand around news SEO and share what I know about it and what I think would be useful information for people. And that's, it's taken on a life of its own, really. And I've been very fortunate to build that profile and build that expertise as one of the specialists in SEO for news publishers.
Very, very interesting, Barry. So guys, for those of you that don't know his newsletter, the link will be in the description below and you can sign up. I'm a subscriber for many years now. It's my go-to reference when I need some information about news SEO or SEO for Google News, if you will, as the name suggests. So very nice. So this is the guy that you follow when we're talking about news SEO. Barry, we've met just a month ago, I believe, in the Netherlands. For those of you that are watching this video at this stage, this was around June 2024 at the DO conference from Alex Tachalova. And I was surprised. I had a very nice time chatting with your wife in the dinner. Don't get me wrong here. And that's when she said, you're Dutch. I was very surprised to hear that because you don't have the accent. If they said, guess where Barry's from, I wouldn't say Dutch. So I was very, very surprised with that. So, and as a matter of fact, for Eindhoven, right?
Yeah, I was from the actual location. I used to work there back in the late 1990s at that campus where the Digital Olympus conference was being held. So I recognized all the buildings, and I recognized the building next to the one where the conference was held. I worked there for 3 years. As one of my jobs, still working on intranet websites at the time. I was a manager of the Philips Semiconductors intranet, which we still had back in those days.
So going a bit off track here, the Philips company, it's from Eindhoven. Am I correct?
Originally from Eindhoven, yeah. It's
I
a
didn't know. Yeah,
the
yeah.
technology and
Interesting.
electronics company started in I think it was late 19th century, early 20th century, in and around Eindhoven by the two Philips brothers. And if you know the PSV Eindhoven football club, the P in PSV stands for Philips. It means Philips
All right.
Sports Club. They started all these local
Ah.
sports clubs, and of course, the PSV football club became the most popular, the biggest profile sports club there.
Yeah, oh, that is something I never knew as well. That is something new. I know Romario, Ronaldo played there, so it's like I had to go to the stadium. It was right down the road from the
Absolutely.
hotel that I was staying, so I had to see that where the legends
Yeah,
played.
whenever
So it
someone
was
says Ronaldo to me, I think of the Brazilian Ronaldo, not the Portuguese Ronaldo, because
there you
he played
go.
so many seasons for us. He got us to champions, and Romario before him as well. Romario is an absolute legend in Eindhoven still.
Oh, so you are an Eindhoven supporter, yeah?
Oh, absolutely,
Cool.
never. That's never
Oh,
going to stop.
that's nice. That's nice. You mentioned that back in the days when you started your own website, you discovered SEO. Beforehand, and I did an interview with Jason Barnard, I think the beginning of the year, and he mentioned in our chat, he said, "Did SEO find you, or you found SEO?" So I'm guessing that you found SEO, as you're saying, because SEO found me. So can you guide us through that little bit, just a little
Yeah,
knowledge
I
on that
think
one
it's a
for
little
yeah.
bit of both. To be honest, I didn't really. I sort of made a conscious decision to specialize in it, but it was an interesting one because I've always considered myself an IT guy first and foremost, a technology guy. You
Mhm.
know, I was an amateur web developer. I did server management, computer support, infrastructure management. I was a network administrator for a while as well. You know, connecting routers and cables and building LAN networks. So I was very much an IT focused person. Um, and then, of course, as an intranet webmaster, which is what the job I had at Philips at the time, you know, I was managing intranet web pages and coding in HTML and building web pages for internal company use. And SEO is just not an issue there. You know, you're not focusing on search engines. You're building an internal structure for people to navigate through. You're not really optimizing anything for search engines. Um, but then when I started working on websites, public facing websites, you know, it becomes a very different system, a very different context where, you know, in an intranet, your job is to just make sure people can very quickly find with a few clicks what they're looking for. And you don't really have to worry about building a new audience because the entire internal company is the audience. Whereas for a website, you know, you have to find prospective customers through a website, and you have to look at what they use to find content, what they use to find products and services, and search, of course, being by far the biggest source of traffic for websites that generate lead and generate customers. So naturally, I looked at all the different aspects at the time. I mean, back in those days, we're talking 2005, 2006, social media wasn't really a thing yet. You know, Facebook wasn't really a thing. You had MySpace, but it wasn't really anything for people to business to business advertising on. So it was search, it was email, and it was also paid search. So I initially started doing a lot of email marketing and doing a lot of paid advertising campaigns, and then realizing that, you know, not a lot of traction there, and we were sort of ignoring the biggest channel, which was organic search. And the initial exposure I had with SEO was through an agency that we contacted to try and help us with that and see what we needed to do. And we had several different agencies that talked to us, and some did some really interesting keyword research for us. Other ones pitched us other solutions, which in hindsight, it's good that we didn't take up on because they pitched us doorway pages, which is very black hat stuff. But you know, 2006, 2007, that was like, yeah, that's normal. That's how you get traffic from Google. And I decided that, you know what, why do we spend money on an agency to try and solve this particular equation? Why don't I just try and see what I can learn about that? So in suppose in that context, yes, it was a very conscious decision for me to focus on it, because for me, when I worked in IT, I often felt very disconnected from how people used what I was doing. I was just focusing on building networks and managing infrastructure, and never really saw how that helped people do their jobs and helped the business. It was just IT for the sake of IT. And I knew I was never going to be what we call a classic marketer. I'm not a very outgoing person. Surprise. I'm very much an IT nerd. But I still like to have a bit of an idea that what I do is meaningful and has a real impact on actual people. And that was what made SEO so attractive for me once I started to understand it. It was for me that perfect combination of technology, the geeky side of it, and the human element of it, and making a meaningful impact to drive people to visit your website and do whatever you want them to do on that website, without becoming an all-out marketer, because I never really felt comfortable with the label of being a marketer, digital marketer, online marketer, because I don't think what I do is marketing. And I think now SEO has matured to such a degree that we can accurately call SEO a product focused discipline. It's not really online marketing, it's not really development, it sort of sits in the middle, which is why I think it's more about product management, SEO as a product focused discipline within an organization. But that's what attracted me to it, that combination of those different elements, where I was still doing technology focused stuff, which I enjoyed and I thought I was quite good at, but also seeing that having meaningful impact on the business and seeing how it relates to people and how they do their job, and what the actual outcome of that is.
That said, I totally agree with you that it's kind of like a product-led discipline, as you said. How did you end up in news SEO or SEO for Google News? Because let's say newsrooms or news portals, they don't really have they have a product, which is the hard news and the content, but how did you end up in that segment?
Yeah, like I said, one of my first jobs in Northern Ireland when I moved here in 2009 was at the Belfast Telegraph. They had the need for an in-house SEO person. They had an external agency here in Northern Ireland who handled their content management system. And that agency actually hired me to be pretty much 40 hours a week exclusively working for the Belfast Telegraph as their SEO person. And I was very lucky that the online editor at the Belfast Telegraph, a fellow called Jerome Crawley, he loved to learn about this and loved to experiment to see what worked and what didn't work. So he and I had a few experiments over the year that I worked there to see if we could poke Google News and with different things and different tactics to see what actually worked and what actually didn't work. And this is when Google News itself was still fairly new, and news results in Google was still fairly new. It was a separate crawler, separate index entirely from regular Google. And it was very much focused on very rapid crawling and indexing of news content, and basically just keyword matching keywords in headlines to what people were searching for in Google to show the article. Which means it was not a very sophisticated set of algorithms that Google was using for news content. So we found some pretty big weaknesses in Google News, and the Belfast Telegraph exploited that to their own advantage, shall we say. I wouldn't say they were spamming Google, but they were making use of the weaknesses in the algorithms when it benefited them to give their articles a bit of an interesting boost. But after I left Belfast Telegraph and started working agency side, I didn't really have a lot of contact with them and didn't really do much work for them anymore, aside from some work from their like the jobs website and the secondhand cars website. But then when I went freelance, um, the Sun newspaper in London, a big UK tabloid newspaper, they had a paywall for several years. It wasn't really working for them, so they decided to drop the paywall, relaunch their website on an entirely new platform, and they realized they needed some SEO help with that. And this was where luck really comes into play, because the person who was in charge of that relaunch project, she was originally from Northern Ireland. She'd been working and living in London for many years, but she was Northern Irish. And she realized that the Belfast Telegraph, as a Northern Irish newspaper, was getting way too much traffic from Google, like way too much. They had no business getting that much traffic, being a very small regional news publisher, but they would rank for nationwide news stories all the time. And that's because of the tactics that Jerome and I managed to find out to sort of exploit Google's weaknesses when it came to news. So she found me as the SEO person responsible for helping the Belfast Telegraph achieve those results. And she asked me to pitch for that and say, hey, you want to be our consultant for the relaunch of our website? And I'm like, this is a golden opportunity. I'd be an absolute idiot to say no to this. So I said yes, and I came on board there as the SEO consultant for relaunching thesun.co.uk, the website. And I was very fortunate that I was a very small part of a very big project with very, very smart people. And it was a massive success. The website, when they relaunched it in 2016, massively outperformed what their projections had been, and that opened a lot of doors for me. Word gets around, people realize that, oh, if you want to do SEO for news websites, maybe talk to that guy because he's had a really successful project with the Sun. And then because the Sun was part of News Corporation, other websites, news websites associated with News Corporation also got in touch. So within like a year, 2 years, I had quite a few big name news publishers as my clients. And again, I was very lucky that those projects ended up being quite successful projects. And then I realized probably in 2017, 2018, that the reason they were all coming to me was because there was nobody else. I was sort of the one-eyed king in the land of the blind. I had established a bit of a reputation of a very small number of projects, and realized there were very few other people out there who had a reputation of being good at SEO for news websites. So I decided, why don't I try and develop the specialty and trying to develop that that reputation as an expert in that industry. And that just went like from 0 to 100 miles an hour in no time, within a year or two, after I decided to, rephrase my website to focus on news SEO, start a newsletter, and got a few more projects under my belt, a few more conference talks, a few podcasts like this one. And within no time, I felt, I've managed to build a bit of a reputation as an expert in SEO for news publishers. And that just kept going and going and going until we are where we are now. And all my clients, bar maybe one or two, are news publishers. And I get bombarded with emails to work with publishers, from the biggest companies in the world to very small niche news publishers focusing on very specific areas, and everything and everywhere in between. And it's been a roller coaster of a ride. And I consider myself a very fortunate, very lucky man to have been in the right place at the right time, and having a bit of luck along the way, and a lot of help from a lot of people along the way as well, because I don't think anybody does this on their own. You always get help indirectly and directly from people who say good things about you to other people, who give you good advice, who give you opportunities to do certain jobs. So it's been a fantastic journey, and I'm very lucky to be where I am today.
It's amazing, Barry, because when you said that, that's when luck came into play. I read a lot of Jim Collins. He's one of my admin go-to writers, a bestseller author, and so on. And in one of his books, he mentioned that capitalizing in search in luck, monetizing in luck, sorry, is when you have these luck moments that you manage to exploit as much as you can, because everybody at some time in their lives or their professional life, they have these luck moments. Some try to, some make the most out of it. Some don't even realize they had that luck. I'm happy for you that you had this luck, and becoming, I would say, one of the only SEO consultants I know for news publishing websites. I don't, from the top of my head, I don't recall anyone else that has this specialization in SEO. You have the link builders, you have the technical SEOs, you have the enterprise SEOs, and so on. But for news publishing, I think, would you say you're the only one in the world doing that? Like in
No,
terms of company, obviously you
I'm,
have the guys in the newsrooms and so
yeah,
on.
I'm not the only one. It's just most of the ones who paved the way before me, like Julian Samples and Matthew Brown, they had some in-house experience and then they went freelance or built their own agency. They were not as good at building their own brand, or maybe they didn't really want to build a personal brand. I wasn't the only one, or even the first one. I think it was just the best at building the brand around that particular discipline. But the best people who do SEO for news websites, like you just said, they work in-house at news publishers. There's a lot of really, really good people doing SEO for news, and nearly all of them work at a news publisher directly in-house. There's not a lot of them on the agency slash consultant side. But I see more and more appearing, which I find quite encouraging. There's more and more people doing really good things and building a bit of a profile as well, because I think it's necessary. I think we need more I need more competition. I need more people to focus on this because there's a huge market out there. There's so many news publishers who are struggling to make gains in Google, and I can't help all of them. It's not my role to do that. I think we need
Hmm.
more consultants, more agencies focusing on SEO for news websites, and because there's so much work out there and so much publishers that really really need help with this.
Yeah, I had this luck as well here in Brazil. I have worked with almost all the biggest news portals here in Brazil, with the exception of one or two. That because one of the works I did for this company when they were migrating to their platform, they're unifying all the CMSs and so on to WordPress, and I helped them create the strategy. I've trained all the news publishers or the editors so they could write for the web and so on. It was a massive project that led me to other news portals and so on, but I did not specialize in that. Nowadays we have one what these news portals in our client list, but we don't specialize in that. And there's a massive demand for that in Brazil. And I say that because obviously, as I mentioned to you beforehand, that we have like this big internet population. So these news portals achieve 100 million page views a month and so on. But since I don't work with the same client in the same industry. There is a massive gap in Brazil, like because they come to work, ask for me to work with them. I don't because I'm already working with this news portal and so on. And it's something that should be exploited, right? Because I see the need for these guys, for audience, and coming from organic search or organic traffic, that is massive. At least here in Brazil, we see that kind of like 80+% of this traffic, their traffic comes from, I'm being very modest here, from search engines. How do you see the same numbers across the world? Because I know you service in the UK, in Ireland, in the US, across the world. Is that something that we see across the board for news publishers?
Yeah, for most of the publishers that I work with, I would say at least half of their traffic comes from different Google sources, which is a combination of the Discover feed, which is very, very popular for many publishers, as well as what I call the news ecosystem on Google Search, and that is primarily like top stories carousels on Google search results, as well as the news tab, and to an extent also the Google News vertical, like news.google.com. But yeah, Discover and Top Stories are probably the two biggest sources of traffic for most of my publishing clients. And like I said, it'll be roughly, those two combined will be roughly half of a website's total traffic. The other half being a combination of Facebook traffic, direct traffic, email newsletter traffic, and then some referral sources here and there. So it's a huge potential source of traffic for publishers. And I would say if I see it depends on the market a little bit, because if I work with an Indian publisher, for example, I would expect to see a very high degree of Discover traffic because the Android phones are very popular there and everybody uses Discover there quite intensely to read the news. So I can easily see Discover being 70-80% of the total traffic. If I see that for a UK based publisher, I'd be a little bit worried. That's not a healthy profile. That's too reliant on Discover, and it shows that they probably don't have enough traction in Google search. On the other hand, if they only have like 2 or 3% of the traffic from Discover, that's probably too little. That's an opportunity for them to grow further in that area. But it also depends on the kind of news, because Discover lends itself really well to niche interests like sport and entertainment and celebrity stuff, but not so much to general news. It's very hard for a general news website to get a huge amount of traffic from Discover unless they have specific niches on their website that they service really well. So you always need to look at it in the context of who their audience is, the kind of devices that their audience uses. Because if it's a very iPhone heavy audience, you'll get a lot less Discover traffic. Whereas if they use Android phones, you'll get more Discover traffic. And also what kind of news it is. Like a B2B news website is not going to get a lot of Discover traffic. It'll be very heavily reliant on the top stories, Google News, and also on direct traffic sources and referral traffic.
You mentioned Discover. We're going to touch that in a minute. But top stories and Google News, or what is the correlation between that? Because is there a correlation? Because in the beginning you mentioned that Google News is a different algorithm from the search engine, from the traditional organic algorithm. Top stories, are they pulled from Google News, or do you need? how do you operate in that kind of optimization? Because obviously top stories is where people consume the content from your news portal, but does that come from the news, Google News? Is there any kind of optimization you need to do for that? Guide
I
us through
think,
these initial stages of your.
yeah. Officially, Google says there's no connection between top stories and Google News. Unofficially, that's bullshit, and there's a very direct connection. I think there's been multiple sample studies done that show that between 96 and 98% of publications that show up in top stories boxes are publications that are approved for Google News. Um, it's very rare to see an article on top stories that's from a website that's not a news website, and that's on purpose. Google wants to make sure that when you as a user you see a top stories box with latest news articles on whatever topic it is that you're searching for, that you trust those news articles, that you trust that Google has selected news from reputable websites that are real news websites producing real news content, so that when you click on that, you're going to get factual, accurate, fact-checked news. And that's all the thing that Google News does when it vets websites and checks websites to make sure they deserve to be in Google News in the first place. So of course Google will marry those two up and use the same systems to determine whether you show up in top stories and whether you show up in Google News. Now, getting into Google News and therefore also getting into top stories is quite hard for a newly launched website with no history whatsoever. I'd say you need to do at least 2 years of constant, continuous, highly accurate, properly sourced and cited journalism and news publishing before Google will consider you as a trustworthy enough website where you have accumulated enough of the quality and authority signals that Google is looking for before you can get into the Google News and therefore also get into top stories. Which means established websites have an advantage. They have an edge. If you're already in Google News and already have the chance to appear in top stories, it makes it a lot easier for you when you start doing SEO and start optimizing your content better to see the results from that fairly quickly. So for newly launched media startups, you have to have long-term vision. You have to have the right context and not expect Google to start rewarding your content in the short term.
That said, does news topical authority plays a role into those rankings? Do you need to work on that? Say, hypothetically talking, in Brazil, we have like 5 big news portals, yeah? And then Google only pulls from top stories, I think 3 or 4 of those guys to exhibit it in the SERP. Is there anything that we need to do to improve the rankings on those on that? Say I'm ranking in 5th, I want to start ranking in top 2 or top 3. And is that influenced by news topical authority, or is there any other things that you need to do? In summary, are there any optimizations that you can do to improve your rankings on Google News to then be featured in the SERPs?
The topic authority is an interesting one because it's something that the news SEO industry has optimized for many years. And Google actually only admitted that they have something called topic authority for news websites last year. Last year, they published an article or a support piece, I'm not entirely sure what, said, oh yeah, we have topic authority. It's primarily intended for local news, to make sure that local news websites show up for a news story that is locally relevant, even if nationwide news websites also pick it up. But we've all optimized for topic authority already for many years. In fact, I'm pretty sure I know exactly when Google started using topic authority, which was in March of 2018. There was a big algorithm update that they rolled out, which didn't affect news publishers in the US, but had a big impact on publishers in the UK. And I think Google did it on purpose because they were sort of testing the grounds a little bit before they rolled it out into the US. And one of the main symptoms of that algorithm update in March 2018 was that big news publishers like the Daily Mail and the Telegraph here in the UK, who used to be able to rank for anything, just because they were very highly authoritative website. No matter what they wrote about, they would rank in Google, both in top stories and in regular search results. They suddenly found their space narrowed and said, right, Daily Mail, you do celebrity and entertainment. Telegraph, you do politics and finance. And anything outside of that, you're just not going to get as much traffic for anymore as you used to. And I think that's when Google really started focusing on different algorithms and different measurements for topic authority. And that's something they kept refining ever since. So if you're a news publisher, if you're a general news publisher that writes about a lot of different topics, you probably have a bit more of a free reign, and you don't really have to worry too much about that. But if you're more specialized, you sort of have to be very clear about what your specialty is. You have to really nail down what your niche is, what your focus is as a journalistic outlet, and decide that, okay, this is the space we want to own. This is the type of news we want to be known for. So let's go all in on that. And Google will reward that. Google likes showing up niche news publishers for niche topics. And you see this very strongly, especially in the US. For example, when American football NFL season starts up again and you do a search for a specific NFL team, you tend to get news results which are dominated by websites that only talk about that one NFL team. I mean, I'm a fan of the Green Bay Packers, and when I search for news about the Green Bay Packers, 9 of the 10 news websites that I see would be websites that only talk about the Green Bay Packers. They talk about no other club whatsoever. And then maybe you get one from NFL.com or from ESPN or from The Athletic. But most of the articles will be from websites that focus very narrowly on just that one team. And that's topic authority made manifest. So I think as a publisher, you have to be very confident about what you are and what your specialty is, and the kind of news and the kind of topics you want to cover, and then build your site structure around that as well. So use the right category pages, the right tag pages, and build that knowledge graph, as it is, because that's how Google understands topics and their relationships. Build that knowledge graph in your website with entity pages, so your categories and tag pages, and good internal linking between them, so that Google very clearly understands that that is your specialty as a news publisher, and you have real good expertise and authority on that topic, and your articles are worth showing in Google for searches on that topic.
That said, does evergreen content help towards your news topical authority? Say you mentioned the Super Bowl and the Green Bay Packers. So, or no, not Super Bowl. You mentioned American football, the Super Bowl, and so on. So, if you want to build your authority around, say, the NFL and the Super Bowl, not only covering the news around the teams and so what's going to happen, who's going to play in the final, and so do evergreen content help towards building that knowledge graph that you mentioned? It helps building that topical authority. Is that how you recommend, not just tags and category pages, like static content, let's say?
All content will contribute to that, because Google then has to take a holistic view of your website, and it's about also your older content from years and years ago. All the content published on your website and how it is merged and linked to in your website plays a role in establishing that topic authority. So it's not just about writing the latest news on that topic, but also about what you said, evergreen, with explainer articles, background articles. If you sign a new player, maybe you write a detailed history about that player, about his college football career, about his accomplishments in college football, with the intent to capture traffic right there and then when that player is in the news, but B, also later down the line, 3, 4, 5 months later, when people search for that player, you should be one of the 10 blue links results with that in-depth article on that player. So it's not just about covering the latest news, but also about providing that in-depth evergreen content behind the news, that second layer of content, as I call it, that helps establish you as an expert, that really shows the quality of your reporting and the quality of your expertise on that particular topic.
Very, very interesting. That still on that same topic, because that's very interesting for me. And as you know, you're working in the news industry. This year, we have two of the most important tentpole events that I've learned from your newsletter as well. Tentpole events mean those events that happen every year seasonally. And so we have the Olympics and we have the elections, not just the US elections. We have like the regional elections here in Brazil. So every year that we have elections, Olympics, World Cup, for news publishers, it's a big deal, because we have these massive movements around the newsroom and dedicated people working around that, strategies that start 6 months before. And so what are your recommendations for news outlets around those tentpole events, say the Olympics and elections? What do you normally recommend? Is there any special strategies or anything that you normally do that you could share with us?
My competitor newsletter, and I say competitor with a bit of a wink and a smile, because I love collaborating with him, is SEO for Journalism from Jesse and Shelby, and they have written really good articles about elections and tentpole events and how to build up for that. And Jesse and Shelby actually work in newsrooms. Jesse works at the Guardian, Shelby works at the Athletic, so they're used to doing this day to day. This is their job, and then they very generously share that knowledge with their SEO for journalism newsletter. But yeah, you have to lay the groundwork. You have to prepare for this. If the elections happen next week, you should have been writing content building up to the election for the last 6 months. You have to build that topic authority over time, and it starts by, this is classic SEO, the hub and spoke strategy, where you have a hub page, which is your main landing page, your category page, basically, for that particular election. And then you have maybe subcategories below that, one for each of the main candidates or each of the political parties. And then you fill those with the content, the news articles, as well as the evergreen articles, with backgrounds and explainers and all those details leading up to the actual moment of the election itself. And then on the day of the election, you should probably have live blogs, multiple live blogs, live articles running at the same time, covering the election, like one master live blog, which is all the major news, and maybe spin off live blogs for sub events that might be happening at the same time, or relevant other developments that might be happening. Like if you have an election on a federal level, which each state having important election moments, you probably have a live blog for every one of your individual states as well. But you have to lay the groundwork first and foremost. Build that topic authority over time. It's not that on the day itself, without any prep work, Google is suddenly going to start rewarding you because you write about the election. You have to make sure that Google understands way before the election happens that you are a proper authoritative website that they can trust for proper coverage on the election. So you have to build that momentum, you have to build that quality of content and the topic authority signals over at least 6 months, if not longer, before the actual event happens. And it gets easier if you do this every year. Like if you have a sports website that focuses on the Super Bowl happens every year, you get better at it. You have processes in place. The writers know what's expected of them. You know what kind of content really hits a chord and does the trick for you. So you refine your systems and your processes, and you get better and better at it every year that you do it. Same with the launch of a new iPhone. If you're a website that covers technology and gadgets, every year Google is going to launch a new iPhone, and every year people are going to be searching for it. So you have to build up to that event. With the moment there's leaks, what's the iPhone 16 going to look like? What kind of cameras are going to have? What is iOS 18 going to do for you? All those sorts of things. So you can build content up to the moment in September when Apple announces the new iPhone, and then that's when you have the live blog with the live coverage of the Apple announcement, all the different features. You create spin-off articles at the same time, in addition to the live blog, and you keep that content wheel churning, and then you keep that landing page the same for the next year. You don't just have a landing page for iPhone 16. No, it's the iPhone launch landing page, the hub page, and you repurpose that for next year, and it becomes the iPhone 17 landing page, then it becomes the iPhone 18 landing page. But you keep that page, you just update the headline, update the content on it a little bit, so that you always have all the signals focused on that one hub page, that one landing page that serves year after year after year as the main spoke for your content around that topic.
That page gets seasoned, get matured, right? The same that we do as we do with Black Friday and so other SEO strategies. I'd say the SEO strategy in the context is the same, right? It doesn't really change. You need absolutely. That page, the old page for Google to trust and be reliable.
In those areas, there is no real difference in SEO for news and SEO for an e-commerce website. They're all the same tactics, really, because they're all using the same algorithms and the same attributes.
Right. That said, before we just move away from Google News, is every website entitled to be in Google News? Like, say, because we have like clients that they're producing a lot of content, they become a hub for, like, say, marketing news or sports news, but not really sports news. They produce a lot of content around sports to help with their product and so on. And they say, I want to be in Google News. I said, hang on, this is not how it works. But they insist because I saw my competitor there. And so what are the criteria, or in answering a simple way, Barry, is every website entitled to be in Google News, or they have to attend certain criteria? Don't need to list them all. Google, I know you know all of them by head, but you don't.
Yeah, Google is quite vague about this in their official guidelines. But in my view, if you are not a pure dedicated news website, you have very little chance of getting into Google News and in top stories. Not impossible, but very, very hard. If your website's main purpose is not news, if you have a product or a service to sell, or some other commercial intents, and news is just a sideshow, just an extra thing that you do, you should not expect to show up in Google News and top stories. You can still make that happen, but it's very, very rare and very, very difficult. I think your best chance is to have a separate domain, a separate website that is purely focused on news and has no commercial messaging outside of news. You
Right.
focus on reporting the news on whatever the topic is that you cover, and that gets into Google News. And you see this work with really specialized news websites. In our own industry, search engine land is in Google News and in top stories. It's basically a hobby blog about the SEO industry that got out of hand, but it's only focused on news. Now they have some other monetization because they also do events, the SMX events, and all those sorts of things. But the main purpose of the website is to report news on the SEO industry. So that's always the framework you have to keep in mind. If the main purpose of your website is news, then yes, you have a chance and you should expect at some stage to appear in Google News and top stories. However, if news is not the main purpose of your website and news is just another part of what the actual goal of the website is, then you should not expect to ever get into Google News.
Makes sense. I follow the same kind of line of thought. Moving away from Google News now and moving into Discover, as you mentioned it, here in Brazil, there's a lot of reliance on Google Discover. As you said, when you're talking about the percentages, here we have like most of the news portals that we work with, and we know that we exchange notes with other newsrooms and so on, or other SEOs doing the same work for them. I think it's like 80, 70% of the traffic comes from Google Discover. And here we have an advent, which is called Web Stories, which works very well. So I must say that I was one of the guys that kind of like not discovered that, but I would say discovered that, start using it. And then everybody is doing it. And all of a sudden, a few years ago, Google kind of like shut the tap. And so how is that in other countries? Like Google Discover as a whole, is there any special optimizations? And does Web Stories work in all like in the UK and other areas that you see? I know India, they work fairly well. Here in Brazil, they still work, not as they used to, but let's talk as Discover as a whole moving into Web Stories.
Yeah. Yeah, Discover is a very interesting beast, and it's very locally personalized. Um, no two people will have the same Discover feed. They'll have entirely different articles because Google knows different things about them. It's a recommendation system for Google to show you articles that they think you might find interesting. Because it's a purely mobile experience, web stories being based on the AMP framework tend to have decent traction there. However, it's also dependent on how many publishers have web stories in the first place, whether or not Google will consider it as a channel. Like you said, in India and in South America, you see web stories pop up in the Discover feed all the time. Also in Africa and South Africa, you tend to see them fairly regularly. In Western Europe and in North America, not so much. And that's also because publishers in Europe and in the US are not really doing much with web stories. So Google doesn't see a need for that to have a big role in the Discover feed. There's plenty of normal articles to show there. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg problem when it comes to web stories in Discover. I'm not entirely sure if Google is showing web stories in South America because there's more of them, or because you know it's because more publishers show it, or because it's something that Google just wants to show more of as a format of the content. And I think Google is hesitant to show less web stories because they really work well and they get a lot of engagement. Whereas in the West, there's just fewer web stories. So Google is like, right, okay, there's not a lot of publishers using web stories, so I don't have to show web stories in Discover. I can just show regular articles and even non-AMP articles. They show up more and more as well. But I always a bit worried when a publisher relies too heavily on Discover, because when it comes to news and top stories, you know what to optimize for, and it's fairly measurable. You can monitor the keywords and monitor your rankings and that sort of thing. Discover, that's much more challenging, much more difficult to optimize for, much more difficult to track, and it's much less accountable. And I have seen websites literally from one day to the next lose nearly all of their Discover traffic because Google rolled out an algorithm update. It's not that the website did anything wrong, just that Google suddenly decided that, yeah, no, we don't like you anymore for Discover, and boom, there goes your traffic. And there's nothing really you can do about that. And that really scares me, the power that Google has to just make half your traffic disappear for no reason. And yes, there's no court of appeals, there's no form you can fill in. You just have to pray to the Google gods that some stage it comes back. And Discover being so unpredictable and unreliable, it worries me when websites are so reliant on it. But at the other hand, we do know what works in Discover. We do have a pretty decent grasp of the kind of content that gets good engagement in Discover, and therefore gets good traffic in Discover. And a lot of it overlaps with optimizing for news. It's about having good headlines that accurately signpost what the article is going to be about. But in Discover, you have a little bit more leeway with clickbaity headlines. I wouldn't necessarily say pure clickbait, but a bit more emotive, a bit more charged headlines that are a bit more exciting than a standard news headline. And also, I know that Google pays attention to the subheading right below the headline. Like if you have an H1 headline on an article page and you have an H2 subheading, you can use that subheading to talk about related topics and related entities. Because Discover is all about matching the article to your known interests as a user. Like if you're interested in cars and in SUVs in particular, Google will know that about you. And then when it reads a headline that talks about an SUV, Google will understand that, oh, this article is about an SUV. You like SUVs. I might show this article to you. So it's about making sure that your headline and your subheading are optimized for the right kind of entities and related entities to make sure that, Google will consider it to show to people who are interested in those entities and those topics, and that your headlines are sufficiently engaging and clickbaity that someone will want to tap on it, but not too clickbaity, because that has the detrimental effect that if you're too clickbaity, you tend not to have the right keyword matching and topic matching. So, you tend to shoot yourself in the foot with that a little bit. And then having a very engaging website that loads really fast, where people like to spend time on and consume multiple articles. Those are very positive signals as well for Google to show more of your content in someone's Discover feed.
Yeah, here is very scary, Barry. But you know why? Because we started doing web stories for a client that wasn't even a news portal. And then I saw that the web stories were getting a lot of traction in Discover. Like the first time I did my talk in Brighton SEO in 2021, I took a case study from here from Brazil using web stories that generated over 1 million visits in from Google Discover. And that was it. Publish, showed up in Discover, and traffic. I kind of like replicated that from some news portals, and that's it. There isn't really an optimization. And I know there are some projects from Brazil from Google helping news publishers with Discover. So as you said, here's it's like even scarier, because I know Google is favoring these news portals with Google Discover traffic. And when you max that with web stories, we were maximizing that. A few years back, a year ago or so, Google closed the tap on web stories. So we're just getting the traffic from Discover, but as it used to be. So we're kind of like too dependent on that front, on Google Discover. We're trying to obviously maximize with visibility in Google News and so on. But down here, it's I would say there is this favoring from Google directing traffic or giving the visibility for these news portals in Discover, either from web stories or articles, and that they have this huge reliance. I'm afraid when they close that tab, what is going to happen?
They are going to close it. We know this.
I know.
Google
Yeah.
always kills off their projects in the long run, and Web Stories is built on the AMP standard, and the AMP standard is basically dead. Now,
Yeah.
Google has withdrawn all their staff from AMP. If you look at the GitHub repository for AMP, which is publicly viewable because it's open source, the number of commits are so tiny compared to what it used to be when Google still actively working on the standard. So the technology underlying web stories is a stagnant technology, while the rest of the web keeps moving forward. So we know it's a matter of time. Now, I think it'll probably have a few years left in it because, like you said, publishers are so reliant on it in certain markets. Google doesn't just want to pull the plug out of nowhere, but I do expect that to start declining in the short-term future, because Google wants to get rid of it as well. They don't want to keep relying on that sort of content and that technology either. So if you are currently relying very heavily on web stories, like you just said, try and build other traffic avenues and get normal non-web story content both in Discover as well as Google News and Top Stories, because that traffic hose is going to turn into a traffic trickle and eventually is going to be turned off entirely.
Yeah. I'm just waiting for that day to happen, you know. And as a matter of fact, when I did the talk in Brighton SEO in 2021, Joe Miller was in the audience, and I did a little joke with him, saying, "Like, oh, I hope Joe Miller's not listening. That web stories are generating a lot of traffic from Discover." I shit you know, a few months later, kind of like things changed down here in Brazil. So I said, "Oh, well, at least I know what's going on with this."
It's your fault, man.
Here.
It's your fault.
I know. I'm the one to blame. So okay, I created the strategy. I killed the strategy. So yeah, I'm not worried about that. Well, jokes aside, we talked a lot about news, topical authority, having the content, using Google News, Discover. But in my opinion, and hopefully that's yours as well, I'm trying to validate one here. Technical SEO for me is a big part of news SEO, because you have all the content that's being produced every day, millions and millions of articles every 2 months and so on. How important is technical SEO, and specifically crawl efficacy? I'm using Jess Show's terminology here because when I saw her chat at Search Love a few years back as well, she said, don't talk about crawl budget, talk about crawl efficacy. And for me, that is all about one of the most important things that you need to do for your news portal, right?
Absolutely. Jess, by the way, she's an absolute genius. I've learned a lot from her over the years, from her talks and her articles about technical SEO for publishers and news websites. She's really at the absolute cutting edge of that. And I fully agree. The bigger your website, the more important technical SEO is. If you have a small website, a couple of hundred, couple of thousand pages, you don't have to worry about how Google crawls and indexes your content. It's not an issue. A couple of 100,000 pages, yeah, you should start paying a bit more attention to that. A couple of million pages, yeah, you definitely need to start paying attention to how Google crawls and indexes your content. And it is about crawl efficacy, about how effective Google is at crawling and indexing your content. When you produce 2 articles a day, yeah, Google will fairly quickly find those and index those, not a real problem. When you publish 200 articles a day, you need to really look at how Google can very efficiently and effectively crawl and index those articles. The single most important thing you can do as a publisher is to make your website lightning fast, because crawling is a time-based metric. There's 24 hours in a day. There's only so much crawling Google can do in 24 hours. If your website responds really, really fast and sends new web pages to Google really, really fast, it means Google can crawl more web pages in the same amount of time, and therefore tends to be more efficient in crawling your website. You can measure this yourself. You look at Google Search Console, you look at the crawl stats report under settings there, you see what Google experiences as the average response time for a crawl request. In an ideal world, that is less than 200 milliseconds. Now, that's very hard to achieve. There's very few websites I work with that have response time under 200 milliseconds. More common is between 400 and 600 milliseconds, which I find sort of acceptable. I think you can live with that. If your response time, however, is over 600 milliseconds, so more than half a second between Google asking for a page and your website sending that page back to Google, that's probably too long. That's not really efficient. And you need to find ways to improve that response time, maybe with more aggressive caching, a better CDN, or whatever you need to do to improve that response time so Google can get to the page very, very quickly and start processing what's on the page. And it's also about the right status codes, If there's a lot of redirects, they consume a lot of crawl budget. Soft 404s consume a lot of crawl budget. Internal link traps that generate infinite URLs with parameters. All those different things you have to take into account. And fortunately, Google Search Console is quite good at pointing those out to you and telling you where Google spends its crawl effort and what it does right and what it does wrong. And then, of course, you need to run your own crawls on the website as well to gather data. And if you have a log file analyzer, great, you can really go nitty gritty into seeing what Google is doing when it crawls your website. Ideally, most of Google's crawl effort is spent on indexable web pages that are actually valid pages that Google wants to call an index, either because they're articles or because they're category and tag pages that collect articles. And you want to minimize the crawl effort that Google has to spend on non-indexable URLs like redirects or non-indexable canonicalized pages and all those sorts of things. When it comes to getting articles indexed very, very quickly, a lot of people mistakenly believe that a news-specific XML sitemap is the best way to do that. Google has the news XML sitemap protocol, which is an XML sitemap specifically for news articles, and ideally you only provide articles published in the last 48 hours in that news XML sitemap. However, I used to think for many years that was the best way. If you had a news XML sitemap, Google would use that to find new articles, and that turns out not to be true. I found that out because one of my clients, a very big US-based news publisher who publishes hundreds of articles a day, accidentally deleted their news XML sitemap. And we didn't notice. We didn't notice anything for 3 months until I went into Google Search Console on a random check and saw that, hey, there's an error in the sitemap report. And that error was that news XML sitemap had been unavailable, served a 404 error. And I started to talk to the client and asked, hey, what's happened here? I need to critically fix this. And it turns out that was accidentally deleted as part of a product update over 3 months ago. But the website still got more traffic. The content got indexed. They had no problem showing up in Google News and top stories whatsoever. And that really changed my thinking about the news XML sitemap. And since then, I've worked with many other clients with similar things. Some of them don't even have a news XML sitemap in the first place, but their content gets called and indexed very, very quickly. And it's because Google crawls your website as the primary way to discover new articles. And it primarily calls your homepage and your main category pages. So if you want to get an article very quickly indexed in Google as a news publisher, the best way is to show the article on your homepage, or if you can't fit it on the homepage, put it in the category page that is like one click away from the homepage. And those are the pages Google tends to crawl most often. And those are the ways where Google discovers newly published articles very quickly. I know with one of my news clients, I asked them for server log files. This is a very, very big UK-based news publisher. And the response I got back from their IT team was, how big is your hard drive, Barry? Because I asked for 3 months of server logs, and they said, right, you have a couple hundred gigabytes of spare space. So I was like, what? And their website is crawled so aggressively, I managed to get a couple of days worth of log files from them. And their homepage was visited by Googlebot every 5 to 10 seconds.
Jesus.
Every 5 to 10 seconds, Google was pinging their homepage like, hey, have you got new content for me? Have you got new content, new article? No? And then, because it was a big homepage that they had as well, and most of the new content started appearing on the homepage straight away. And when they publish a new article and it goes on the homepage, within a minute, it's in Google's index. It's very, very quick because Google finds it so quickly. And on average, for most of my news publishers, when they publish an article on their homepage, within 4 or 5 minutes, it's indexed. No later than that. That's like the norm. If it's longer than that, I'm worried. Like, oh, you might have an indexing of a crawling issue here, because Google just uses your website's homepage to find new content.
I've been using Jet Octopus integrated to the client server, which is in real time. So they kind of like crawl it every time I need is all there. So I don't need a 200 gigabyte hard drive. It's been working quite well. I've used other tools as well, but I kind of like settled with Jet Octopus, which is so easy to integrate. It doesn't have so much compliances and features, and I'm quite liking it. So it doesn't, but it's not every newsroom that's going to let you connect a tool to their server. And so
most of my clients will not let me anywhere near the infrastructure. They give me access to Google Search Console, and if I'm lucky, they whitelist my IP address so I can crawl their website, and that's all the access I'm ever going to get.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's a shame because that would uncover a lot of ideas. Barry, you mentioned about the homepage, yeah? That kind of like I was doing this research for this client of mine here in Brazil as well, comparing the sizes of the homepages. And Google has a crawl limit of 15 megabytes. Am I correct in assuming that should I exploit these 15 megabytes, adding as much content and much sections on my homepage as possible so Google can find as many links as possible? Or is that not something that I should do, like have a homepage that's super heavy? So
yeah,
Google
there's
won't
a
crawl
balance
it.
there because the bigger the homepage, the slower your response time. and you want to make
Right.
sure the response time is really quick as well. Plus, it's
Hmm.
not just about having as many links on the homepage, it's also about the velocity of links. The reason
Right.
Google crawled that particular homepage so often was because they publish so many articles a day. This is a publisher that does hundreds and hundreds, 900 articles on a daily basis. And Google knows that every time they're going to crawl that homepage, there's a fairly decent chance it's going to find a new URL. So it's not purely the size of the homepage; it's also the volume at which the homepage changes. So if you want to improve crawling on your website, um, change the homepage very often, which is a
Mm.
bit of a shortcut. So it's easier said than done because you have to make a meaningful change. But Google learns. Google learns that its crawling is rewarded or not. It's not just going to crawl your homepage because for the sake of calling it. Google learns how often your homepage changes, what the chances are of new content, and what Google doesn't want to waste crawl effort. They want to make sure
Right.
they're efficient with their crawling. So they want to make sure that they spend crawl effort on the right pages on your website so that they find content fairly quickly when it's published and start showing it in the news ecosystem. And you can't just tell Google, oh, go crawl my homepage 100,000 times a day if there's nothing new for Google Bob to find there, because Google is going to be like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. What's the point? So it's about, making sure that when you publish content, you give it the best possible chance of getting crawled in index very quickly. And your homepage is generally your most crawled page. It's the most linked to page in your internal link system, generally, because every page on your website is going to have a link back to the homepage. It's probably the most linked to page from external websites as well. Whenever someone cites and quotes your website, they tend to link to the homepage. Plus, it's the page, if you're a news publisher, that has the most changes because you update it constantly with new publishing, new content being added there, and that's why Google crawls your homepage so often. So it's all those factors combined that really help Google understand where it can find content on your website and how to best spend its crawl effort.
So, just on that last question on that subject, and then we can move away from it. And so, it's not about the size, right? But it's about how often you update your homepage. So, if you are to say, like, if you're updating with the news articles that you're publishing every time and so on. So, this is what will let Google understand. So, am I correct in saying if I can only ask for one log file for my client, could it be for the homepage so I can see how many times Google is asking to crawl it, and that will determine how authoritative the website is and determine how much of changes I need to do to the homepage? Can I
I'm
do that?
not
Because
sure.
sometimes we don't get all of that. So
Yeah,
or
I'm not sure
not.
you're going to learn an awful lot, except from how important Google finds the homepage, and
Right.
but you can sort of have a bit of a educated guess between the delay between publishing and indexing. If your
Mm-hmm.
homepage is crawled once every 10 minutes, then it can take 10, 15 minutes for a new article to get published. If your
Got it.
homepage is crawled every minute, within 2 or 3 minutes, you'll have an article indexed in Google once you publish it on the homepage. Because the
Okay.
crawling is initial and then the processing, and then it appears in the index. So there's a bit of an
No
extra.
need to log file analysis then.
No, no.
Got it.
Most of my clients don't give me log file access. I stopped asking it for most of my clients, to be entirely honest, because I don't find it all that useful, unless I'm like in a long-term engagement with a client and really want to squeeze every single bit of performance out of it. But for most of my work, which is one-off site audits, I don't need log file access. I just need access to Google Search Console, and the crawl stats report there is usually very indicative of any crawl issues that the website might have. Plus, of course, I run my own crawl on the website. Now, you use JetOctopus. I use Sitebulb. I really like Sitebulb as a crawler, and I just use that for all my technical SEO audits for any client website that I work with, because it really gives me that baseline of technical insight into the website and what's working well and what's not working well.
Right. Yeah, I use Sitebulb as well because I like Jet Octopus for the log analysis. Sitebulb, in terms of technical analysis, is much, much more complete than Jet Octopus.
Mm-hmm.
Well, just to sum up things in the technical side of SEO for news SEO, how important is structured data? Or is it, if it is important?
Officially, having structured data, like especially article structured data, news article structured data, officially it's not required. Unofficially, you better have it. It really helps Google to very quickly index your content. Um, I don't think you need all bells and whistles, detailed, nested, long snippets of structured data. In fact, I think a shorter, simpler snippet is probably better than a longer, detailed snippet nowadays, because it's much easier and simpler for Google to process and much less chances of errors appearing in there as well. But I do think you need article or news article structured data on your article pages at the very least. Beyond news article structured data, I think it's useful to have breadcrumb list structured data on your articles and also on your category pages, because it helps Google understand the structure of your website and the hierarchy of content.
Mm.
I think having person structured data on your author pages, your journalist's bio pages, is useful, because again, it helps Google connect the dots and understand who the people are that write for you, and what kind of expertise and authority that they have on the topics that they write about. Um, and beyond that, a lot of it, video object structured data for video pages is very useful. But outside of that, that's really the list of it. I think there's a bit of a trend in the SEO industry to try and mark up everything, even if you don't know if it's directly useful, because hey, it gives us new stuff to do and Google might see it and might use it. Whereas I'm a bit more of a minimalist approach and say, yeah, just do the bare necessities and that's enough. And 9 times out of 10, that'll probably do 99 times out of 100, that's all the performance you're going to get out of it. And doing more structured data is not going to help you. It's not going to move the needle. It's not going to improve your traffic anymore. But I do think you need the bare minimum of structured data, the ones that Google actually recommends. And there were recommended and required attributes in their documentation. Make sure you have those. But beyond that, you probably don't need more than that.
That's cool. Cool. Thanks for that one. And to sum things up, the last question, Barry. For all news outlets down here in Brazil, what are the tactics that you'd recommend? They're being big, small, for all sizes. If you're summing things up to send a message to all the news rooms here in Brazil that are focusing on SEO or should be focusing, what would you recommend them?
Oh, that's a tough one. A one size fits all approach. I mean, I have regular conversations with, I suppose, all my clients, and there's a real temptation to put SEO in front of journalism, that they write first for what they think will drive clicks on Google. And I think that's the wrong way around. I think as a publication, if you want to survive in the long run, you want to thrive and be profitable and have a loyal audience, you should always start with your journalism. Like, what is your identity as a news publisher? What do you want to be known for? What do you want to write about? What is your journalism good at? And if you've got that nailed down, if you've got that figured out, then you bring in SEO and social and email and all the others to help make that come alive and make that be a profitable business. But I see too many publishers do it the other way around. They say, oh, there's a lot of traffic on Google for this particular keyword. There's a trending topic. Let's go write about that. They're chasing after clicks rather than letting the clicks chase after them. And I think that those tactics, they do work in the short term, and they temporarily get more traffic to your website. But in the long term, they're just damaging your brand. They're damaging your website. You're not building up the authority signals that Google is looking for. And more importantly, you're not building up the trust that your readers want to invest in you. You need to make sure that your audience always finds you, no matter what happens. Some of the biggest news publishers in the world get most of their traffic from Google, not because they show up in top stories, but because people type their brand name into Google. The Daily Mail in the UK gets most of their traffic from Google, and they don't show up in very many top stories boxes because Google doesn't really like the Daily Mail. But most of the traffic is people typing in Daily Mail in Google and then going directly to their website. And that makes you immune to whatever the hell Google wants to do. It makes you immune to Facebook, makes you immune to Apple. You have a loyal audience that wants to go directly to your website. And then you can optimize around that with trying to maximize discover and top stories, and optimizing your social and your email subscriptions and all of those. But if you don't have that unique proposition that makes you a brand worth visiting, then I think you're always going to be struggling. You're always going to be chasing after the next big thing, and you're never really going to feel confident as a brand and as a business.
It's very, I like the approach of building your brand and focusing on your, because I think that's the end of the day, that's what you need. And the less, well, it's a cliche now industry, but the less you think about Google, the better you're going to perform in Google. So I think that really applies to news SEO, right?
Yes, absolutely. That's definitely the case.
Cool. Barry, thank you very much for this chat has been amazing. I've learned a lot. I hope everybody that's watching these will also learn a lot. And any last words, mate?
I don't know what I want to say. I enjoyed the chat. I always like talking about SEO for news websites, SEO for publishers. I like to emphasize something I said at the start as well. We all get help from other people along the way. I am very lucky that I've had people around me that I could always ask questions to, and who were willing to share their knowledge and share their insight, and help me along the way. And that's something I want to pay forward as well to the rest of the SEO industry. This is why I have an open email policy. Anybody can always email me and ask me questions. This is why I like doing podcasts like these to share my knowledge and hopefully spread a little bit of what I know. And that's how I think we as an industry get better, when everybody is being open and honest and willing to share and willing to contribute to the whole SEO industry. So yeah, I think that's probably my final word. There is no such thing, like Arnold Schwarzenegger said, no such thing as a self-made person, like a self-made man. Everybody is helped by others along the way, and that's how we all achieve success. It's never you doing it all on your own. So don't be afraid to ask for help either. Don't be afraid to reach out to others and ask for questions, because I've been doing this for 20, 25 years. I still ask for help. I still go to people like Lily Ray and Glenn Gabe and Mary Haynes for specific issues and specific challenges that I have. And hopefully I can be that person for other people as well.
Yeah, I like that as well. Keep the wheel turning, right? I've learned a lot from you guys, like Barry, as you said, Lily, and even back in the days of Whiteboard Fridays from Ren Fishkin. So that's what I try to do here as well. So I'm glad that you have the same kind of approach to this thing and keep sharing. That's what I want to do as well. And once again, thank you very much for accepting this, to have this chat with the audience from Don't Panic It's Organic, especially Brazilian, but this will reach all over the world.
Thanks very much for having me, Philippe. And can I just, you probably need to walk your dog.
Yeah, you see, he's got a cat. He's seeing that there's a cat that goes to the next door. It's always annoying him. I have 3 dogs, so yeah, I'm gonna take him for a little walk now. E foi isso aí, pessoal. Esse foi mais um episódio aqui no Don't Panic It's Organic. Não se esqueça de inscrever no canal e todos os links, comentários, e-mails do Barry estarão aqui embaixo. Até a próxima, pessoal. Tchau, tchau.